Hello, my name is Paul Geyer, and I'm here to chat with you today about ethical issues in design build. This is the challenge that I see that we have as professional engineers with the design build construction delivery process. It's become very popular, but it also presents ethical challenges for engineers, and the question is, can these be managed? By way of introduction, this tells you a little bit about what I've been doing for the last few decades. In particular, for 35 years, was what I characterize as a straight-ahead designer producing drawings and specifications for the construction of buildings and infrastructure. And I dealt with all types of construction delivery processes, the traditional design bid build, construction management, and the currently popular design build. And this was on a very broad range of projects ranging from extremely large to small. Following the 35 years of design experience, I had the opportunity to spend 9 years in the public policy arena as a principal advisor to the California legislature on infrastructure and capital outlay issues. And it was during this period that the design build concept became very politically popular in California, and I did a great deal of research and analysis and evaluation on this issue in my role as an advisor to the California legislature. So this is kind of how I'll be talking about things today, the chapters in the book, if you will. Some introductory comments, then let's take a quick look at what is design build, and of course most of us, if not all, have a pretty good idea what it is. Second, I want to make a point or get across a concept, and that is the concept of two different processes. One, which I call a construction delivery process, and the second, a construction procurement process. Another concept that I would like to get across is that of criteria, and that in construction procurement there are two types of criteria that can be used for award of a contract, what I characterize as subjective and objective. And hopefully this will become clearer as I move along. Finally, or next to last, we will get around to, well, what are the ethical issues? And then finally, how do we resolve the ethical issues? Because I would want to make clear right at the start here that even though some things I say may sound like I'm a little bit disenchanted with design build, that's not really the case. I think that it has value in a couple of areas particularly, and that it will be beneficial to maintain design build as an option for owners moving forward. However, if the implementation of design build is not done properly, I think that the door is opened to candidly corruption. So what is design build? It's a process for undertaking construction projects that has become increasingly popular. Although used to a substantive degree by private owners for many decades, it was rarely used by public agency owners because competitive bidding laws required separation of the design and construction contracts. Designers, professional engineers, and architects were retained under contract or employed in-house by public agencies and private companies to prepare definitive drawings and specifications, which were then used as the basis for competitive bidding by construction contractors. It, I believe, would be naive to suggest that construction contractors ever enjoyed obtaining their work by competitive bidding. Indeed, I believe the opposite is very much the case. and by astute interaction with public policymakers, the construction industry has done an excellent job in recent years of changing the laws and regulations in a vast swath of public agencies in the United States. And along with this, construction contractors have convinced more private owners that they are a convenient one-stop source of complete design and construction services. Indeed, very few construction contractors today who can afford a pickup truck um, do not have a design build sign painted on the side. This situation, however, raises ethical issues for professional engineers and architects. It also raises ethical issues for public agency managers, many of whom may be professional engineers, and it raises business issues for private owners that they would be wise to consider. This is what we will talk about today. Now, design build, as we all by now know, is a process whereby an owner contracts with a single entity to both design and construct a project. Nominally, this entity could have complete design and construction staff, quote, in-house, and there are a very small number of very large companies that have developed these capabilities in-house. However, in practice, projects are still undertaken as they always have been. In design build, one entity contracts with the owner to provide complete design and construction services, and that entity then subcontracts the majority, if not all, of the actual work to a variety of subcontractors. Since the design build process has become prevalent, the entity contracting with the owner is almost always a construction entity, that is, a general contractor. No doubt this pattern will continue in the future because A, general contractors have demonstrated over many decades that they are much better marketers than our professional engineers and architects, and B, state laws provide generally that only a licensed construction contractor can enter into a contract with an owner to provide construction services. So the situation on the design build ground is that professional engineers, going forward, the term architects will be assumed included within the term engineers in this discussion, are contracted to or employed by construction contractors. This is in contrast to the traditional design bid build process where the engineer has been contracted to or is employed by a public or private owner. Now, before going further, I want to make clear that I do believe that there are certain aspects of the design build process that have substantive value to benefits as I see things, and they are worth preserving, and so that owners can have design build as an option for construction procurement. First of all is the early involvement of the builder in the design process. Although we as designers would like to think that we know everything that there is to know about designing buildings and constructing them even, actually we don't, and the builders can contribute a lot in the design phase. So early involvement of the builder in the design process is a significant positive attribute of the design build process. Secondly, the design build process removes the owner from disputes between the builder and the designer. Under the traditional design bid build, why the designer is working for the owner, and the law that has developed thanks to our friends in the legal community is to the effect that the owner is liable for any errors or omissions by the designer. And errors and omissions happen all the time. People make mistakes all the time. They always have and they always will, and that includes engineers and architects. And in the legal system here in the United States, the owner ends up being liable for the errors or the mistakes of the designer because the designer is working for the owner, is being paid by the owner, takes direction from the owner, and so the owner is liable. Now, and that is, however, is not the case in the design build arrangement, because there the designer is working as a subcontractor to the builder, and that removes the owner from the position of being liable for the mistakes of the designer. Those mistakes will still take place, and there will still be disputes between designers and builders, but the owner will not get dragged into those, and that is a significant benefit for owners. Now, before going further, I would like to frame the discussion. First, I want to make the distinction that there are two types of processes we are talking about: a construction delivery process and a construction procurement process. Then secondly, I would like to make the point that in the award of contracts, including design build contracts, that they can be awarded by an owner, whether a public agency or a private owner, using two types of criteria: what I call objective criteria and subjective criteria. And hopefully this will become clear as we move along. Now, first, let's look at what I characterize as the construction delivery process. And a construction delivery process, I believe, basically defines the contractual relationships between the participants in the project and the authority's processes and reporting relationships. For example, in the traditional design bid build processes, which is actually a combined construction delivery and procurement process, the designer, a professional engineer, is under contract to or employed by the owner. The engineer is paid by the owner, takes non-technical direction from the owner, reports to the owner, and is responsible for acting in the best interests of the owner. On the other hand, say a plumbing subcontractor is under contract to the general contractor, is paid by the general contractor, takes direction from the general contractor, reports to the general contractor, and is generally bound to comply with the direction of the general contractor. This is the picture of the arrangement for the construction delivery process in the traditional design bid build arrangement organizational structure. In the design build process, however, the designer or the engineer's position is different. The engineer is under contract to or employed by, is paid by, reports to, and takes non-technical direction from the general contractor. The engineer is in the same position as any other subcontractor working for the general contractor on the project. And this figure 2 illustrates the organizational structure in a simple way in the design build construction delivery process. Now let's look at the construction procurement process as compared to the construction delivery process. A construction procurement process, A, defines the criteria for award of the contract, and B, the process for award of the contract. There are two types of criteria for awarding contracts, including design build contracts: subjective and objective. This is true of contracts awarded by private owners as well as public agencies. Depending on the criteria to be used for awarding a contract, different processes may be used. There is nothing that prevents the use of design build construction delivery process with an objective construction procurement process. Almost every implementation, however, of design build has been done by altering traditional competitive bidding laws, regulations, policies, and practices to permit a contract award to be based on subjective criteria. So let's look at subjective criteria. Subjective criteria for award of public and private contracts are criteria with which the awarding entity, such as a contract award panel in a public agency, or a person, such as a public agency or private company manager, inherently has discretion in deciding to whom to award a contract, When exercising that discretion, the awarding entity or manager can use what may be called overt criteria, such as qualifications, experience, best value. The terminology varies constantly. However, essentially, this is the way proponents of design build like to and do purport that design build contracts should be awarded using these overt criteria: qualifications, experience, and best value. The words vary, but the nature of criteria that may be enunciated fall into one of these categories. These are the category that are typically declared by the owner will be used in making award decisions. The concepts underlying the criteria are laudable. Award the contract to the most qualified competitor. Award the contract to the most experienced competitor. Award the contract to the competitor who will deliver best value to the awarding agency or company. But in making judgments about which competitor is best qualified, most experienced, or will deliver the best value, subjective judgments must be made. When subjective judgments are permitted in the award process, there is the opportunity for inappropriate covert criteria to be used, such as political patronage, exchange of favors, essentially bribes, and personal relationships. In the case of a private owner or closely held private company, there is no reason why use of overt criteria for awarding a contract is inappropriate because the owner is spending his own money. But in the case of larger companies with stockholders, and certainly in the case of public agencies, the awarding managers are playing with other people's money, and awarding contracts based on covert subjective criteria is inappropriate. As far as objective criteria, an objective criterion is one which does not permit the awarding managers to make subjective judgments that will influence the award process. There is, in my experience, and I've had a fair amount, there is only one practical objective criterion, and that is lowest cost. Only with competitive bidding based on lowest cost is the ability of awarding managers to subjectively manipulate the process to deliver the contract to a favored competitor eliminated. Now, some observations in this area. First, this concept of best value. Although award based on, quote, best value, end quote, purports to be objectively based on cost, the reality is that many subjective judgments are inherent in arriving at a number that represents best value. For example, subjective assumptions must be made about the useful life and maintenance costs for building components, such as roofing and exterior cladding systems. And subjective judgments must be made about such intangibles as aesthetics, occupant comfort, and building efficiency. And the relative value of different criteria requires subjective judgments. For example, Figure 3, which you will see shortly, shows an actual award summary for a major design build contract awarded by the state of California on the basis of best value. These criteria can only be applied by awarding managers making subjective judgments. The weighting of criteria is subjective. Why is, quote, building performance plan worth 45 points instead of 46 or 44 or 50? Why is community outreach worth 15 points and not 13 or 21? With regard to these point systems, commonly managers who wish to exercise subjective judgment in awarding contracts will use a point system to give the appearance of objectivity in the award process. Such point systems are not objective because subjective judgments must be made in determining how many points to award each competitor on specific subjective criterion. For example, judgments that one competitor's building aesthetics are worth 10 points and another's are worth 8 points, or that one competitor's management team is worth 15 points and another's is worth 18 points, are inherently subjective. Figures 4, 5, and 6, which you will see shortly, illustrate an actual state of California design build contract and illustrate how simple it is to manipulate a subjective point system to award a contract to a favored competitor. Figure 4, which you will see shortly, shows the subjective criteria used and the points awarded to competitors. Why is a small and disabled veterans utilization plan worth 400 points and a life cycle cost analysis plan only worth 250? Why was Company A's design impact plan worth 107 points rather than say 106 or 108 or 91? Why was Company B's design impact plan worth 100 points instead of 101 or 99 or 108 or 125? As Figure 5 shows, a modest shifting of points would result in Company B, not Company A, getting the contract. By merely shifting 4% of the possible points from Company A to Company B, there is this entirely different result. Or, as Figure 6 shows, if 10% of the maximum possible points were shifted from Company A and 1% from Company B to Company C would have been awarded the contract. The order of the competitors would have been completely reversed from ABC to CBA. Now, the best of intentions may come into play in the award of contracts. All awarding managers avow the best intentions when permitted to exercise subjective judgment in a procurement process. No doubt many sincerely try to remain true to those intentions. There are always those, however, who place self-interest above that of their agency or company, and history has shown that bad drives out good. This is the nature of human nature. The only way to institutionalize long-term integrity of an agency's or company's procurement process is if it is based on the only practicable objective criterion, lowest cost as determined by competitive bidding. Here we see Figure 3, which is a summary of the criteria and the weightings assigned by the state of California on a very large design build contract. This was a project about 15 years ago. It had a $500 million price tag at that time. It would be a billion-dollar project today. And these are the criteria that were established and the point values assigned to them, and you can use your own judgment about the integrity of this award structure. Here is a summary in Figure 4 of another design build contract awarded by the state of California. Again, about 15 years ago, it was a $126 million building. Today, that would easily be a $250 million building. And the criteria that were used are what you see in the first column on the left. The relative point weightings that were assigned to these criteria by the award panel are in the next column. And then you see the actual number of points that were awarded to the three finalist competitors. And adding up the points, Company A got the contract. But by simply shifting 4% of the maximum possible points from Company A to Company B, as shown here in Figure 5, you could award the contract to Company B. Or, as illustrated here in Figure 6, shifting a few more points around, you could award the contract to Company C. And perhaps these points might be shifted because of the coming into play of the subjective or covert subjective criteria of political patronage, bribes, and personal relationships. Okay, what are the ethical issues then that are raised when the design build process is being employed? Well, first of all, we have to consider the obvious, the conflicting owner and general contractor objectives. In a typical design, build, construction, delivery process, the engineer is being paid by a general contractor. The general contractor in many cases will have obtained the design-build contract by competitive bidding and is understandably concerned about reducing costs in order to maximize profit on the project. There's nothing wrong with that. That's human nature. That's the way our economic system works, and it has worked very well for hundreds of years. The general contractor reasonably will encourage those he has hired to work on the project, the subcontractors, such as a professional engineer or a plumbing subcontractor, to reduce costs as much as possible. This economic pressure with which the engineer is faced conflicts with the duty he would have under the traditional design bid build process to exercise his knowledge and skills to the benefit of the company or agency owner that will own the building or other infrastructure project. This conflict does not exist with design bid build. So the ethical challenge faced by the engineer is, where is the dividing line between the engineer's responsibility to the economic interests of the general contractor and the cost, quality, and serviceability interests of the building owner? Secondly, there is the issue of the integrity of the procurement process. The integrity of the procurement process is important when playing with other people's money. This is important in public agency procurement because it is taxpayers' money that is being spent. And taxpayers, I think it is fair to say, have generally not surrendered their money with a high degree of willingness. Nobody pays taxes willingly. It's also important in the private sector where stockholders' money is spent and corporate management has a duty to expend corporate funds wisely and without waste. So the ethical issue that arises here is the integrity of the procurement process, and specifically design-build contracts should not be awarded based on subjective criteria that can be manipulated by managers in order to award contracts to inappropriately favored contractors. This is not an easy issue to resolve. The owner, whether a public agency or a private company, rightly wants to obtain the highest quality facility at the lowest possible price. The general contractor, quite reasonably, wants to maximize his profit on a job. Under the traditional design bid build process, the designer, the engineer, was not caught between these conflicting objectives. The engineer was paid by the owner, and the engineer exerted his best efforts on behalf of the owner's interests. He did this by preparing working drawings and specifications that would provide the owner with a facility of the highest quality and serviceability within the owner's budget, and then undertook to assure that that is what the owner received by inspecting the contractor's construction work. There's nothing inherent in the design-build construction delivery process that necessitates awarding design-build contracts based on subjective criteria. That the practice of doing so has developed and is widely employed is unfortunate. All of the real benefits of the design-build construction delivery process can be realized for the benefit of the owner using a construction procurement process that utilizes objective criteria for award of the design-build contract and thereby protects the integrity of the procurement process. This is true for both public agency and private sector contracts. The integrity of procurement processes is of fundamental importance to public agencies, certainly, because it is taxpayers' money that's being spent. No one would argue publicly that government employees do not have a fiduciary responsibility to manage public funds in a prudent and ethical manner. Indeed, the same can be said of managers employed by private corporations where stockholders' money is managed. The issue of maintaining the integrity of the procurement processes does not arise because of anything intrinsic to the design, build, construction, delivery process. The issue of integrity of construction procurement processes arises because proponents of design build have found it convenient to define the design build process as inherently requiring procurement processes based on subjective criteria. This is not surprising. Construction contractors have overwhelmingly been the advocates for the design-build process. From the inception of competitive bidding for construction contracts over a century ago, construction contractors have disliked, if not detested, competitive bidding, the traditional design bid build process. Construction contractors much prefer to obtain work based on subjective criteria than the objective criterion of lowest cost to the owner. By bundling subjective procurement into the design build concept, design build's proponents have been very successful in changing laws, regulations, policies, and practices of public agencies and private companies to allow and even require the use of the design build process, including procurement based on subjective criteria. So how do we resolve these ethical challenges? Well, I believe that they can be resolved, and specifically that there are two processes that can be employed for procurement and delivery of construction projects that will allow the owner to have the benefits of the design build process, and there are benefits, without sacrificing the integrity of the procurement process. These two processes that I believe will resolve these ethical issues are one that I refer to as two envelopes, and that'll be clearer to you as we move forward. And the other is construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts. And now these are combined processes, combined construction procurement with construction delivery. And I believe that utilization of either of these two processes can allow owners to have the benefits of design build as a construction delivery process while avoiding the ethical challenges that can arise with inappropriate construction procurement. So first, let's talk about the two envelopes process. It is proven to be objective and still allows competitors the flexibility which proponents of design build claim is essential to its implementation. It has been used for decades by public agencies, most notably in the defense industry, but it has rarely been used in the construction procurement area because, frankly, I think the traditional design bid build processes have served public agencies and private owners very, very well over many decades. And the proof of this is outside your window, the streets, the buildings, the sewer systems, and all those things that have been procured and constructed using the traditional design bid build. But the two envelopes process, I believe, is an option, and here are its fundamental steps. And we will look at these in more detail later. First, the owner issues a statement of needs. He says, this is the project that I want designed and constructed. He issues that statement of needs in a request for proposals to competitors. And the competitors, and there may be a pre-qualification phase that precedes this, and we'll look at that later, but a request for proposals to competitors to submit design and cost proposals in two envelopes. So the statement of needs says I want a 50,000 square foot office building. And one competitor says, well, I'll make it 3 stories high and build it out of brick. And another one says, I'll make it 1 story high and construct it out of concrete, and this is what it'll look like. That's the technical proposal. That goes in envelope number 1. Then the competitors then put their price in on a piece of paper and stick it in a second envelope, seal it, and that is their cost proposal. So the competitors submit a technical proposal and a cost proposal. The owner collects all of the technical proposals, opens them up, He's got 30 proposals he's received. He looks at them and he says, well, it looks like these 6 here, that they're technical proposals, adequately satisfy my statement of needs. So then those 6 competitors move to the second phase of the procurement process, which is the opening of the cost envelopes. The cost envelopes are opened and the competitor with the lowest price gets the contract. So the competitors are allowed the highly vaunted flexibility that they say that they need to have. The owner has flexibility and can exercise subjectivity. But when it comes down to the final decision of who gets the contract, it's based on the one single objective criterion, which is lowest cost. And this prevents the inappropriate subjective criterion of political patronage, bribes, and personal relationships from creeping into the procurement process. Now, the second process that I believe can allow for the implementation of the design build process and control these ethical issues, essentially corruption of the procurement process. And this is construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts. And those are keywords. Now, these are the steps in the construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts approach. The owner issues a request for qualifications. Tell me how great you are at designing and building buildings. The owner sends out that RFQ to 30 competitors. They all send in their statements of qualifications. He looks at them all and he exercises subjective judgment in selecting a construction manager. Now, this is exactly the way the traditional design bid build process works. When a government agency, as an example, subjectively awards a design contract to an architect engineer firm, the architect engineer firm then prepares the working drawings and specifications, which are competitively bid. So in traditional design bid build, maybe somewhere in the 5 to 10% of the project value range is awarded based on subjective criteria, and 90 to 95% is awarded based on competitive bidding. That's traditional design bid build, the breakdown between contract award subjectively and contract award objectively. With a construction management approach, you are increasing the percentage of the project value that is awarded subjectively, because you are subjectively selecting a construction manager which consists of essentially the skill set of a general contractor plus the skill set of an architect engineer firm. And so the percentage of the project value might be around maybe as much as 25% of the project value. But I believe that this is a satisfactory and acceptable compromise to make, because then the selected contract manager, which includes the architect engineer, works cooperatively with the owner to prepare definitive drawings and specifications in bid packages for the various subcontracts. And we need to recognize, of course, that most of the work on construction projects is accomplished by subcontractors, not by the general contractor. The general contractor is a manager. He's not out there pounding nails and twisting wires. So these bid packages for subcontracts are prepared. They are circulated for competitive bids by subcontractors. The subcontractors submit their prices, and the subcontractors, the plumbing subcontractor with the lowest price, gets the job. and then the work is accomplished. And of course, the benefit of this approach is that the benefit of competitive bidding flows in this process to the owner. The say cost savings that are realized by competitive bidding of the trade subcontracts flows to the owner, not into the pockets of the general contractor, as is the case in the traditional design bid build process. So these are the fundamental steps in the construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontract option. This construction procurement process allows the construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts process allows a somewhat larger percentage of the total project cost to be awarded based on subjective criteria, but the largest portion is procured using the objective criterion of lowest cost based on competitive bidding. For example, in a traditional design bid build process, about 5 to 10% of the project cost is awarded to a design firm based on subjective criteria such as experience and qualifications, and the remaining 90 to 95% is procured based on the objective criterion of lowest cost based on competitive bidding. With the construction management with bidding of trade subcontracts process, about 15 to 25% of the project cost is awarded to a construction management firm based on subjective criteria such as experience and qualifications, and the remaining 75 to 85% is procured based on the objective criterion of lowest cost based on competitive bidding. Allowing this increased project cost to be awarded based on subjective criteria is a reasonable compromise to obtain the benefits of the design build construction delivery process. Now let's look at these two processes in a little more detail. The two envelopes process and construction management with competitive bidding of the trade subcontracts. First, the two envelopes process. It's a proven system of procurement for public agencies. For example, it's often used by the Department of Defense to procure new military equipment and systems. It has seldom been used for buildings and infrastructure construction because of the generally satisfactory results that have been obtained by public agencies and private companies over many years using the traditional design bid build system. As more public agencies have come to believe there can be benefits to using a design build construction delivery process, two envelopes provides a procurement process that will protect the integrity of public agencies and private companies' procurement processes by assuring that contracts are awarded based on objective criteria. So here are the steps in the two envelopes process. The owner defines the building it needs. A building or other infrastructure project is defined by preliminary drawings and outline specifications. The more definitive and detailed they are, the more likely the agency or company is to get what it needs. How definitive do these statement of needs definitions need to be? My suggestion is somewhere between 50 and 30% of working drawings should be about right. The bigger and more unique a project, the greater the need for more definition. Now, there is a distinction between, in my mind, between needs and wants. What an agency needs is what is necessary, an agency or company needs is what is necessary to fulfill its mission. What it wants is not necessary, but it would be nice to have, i.e. a brick facade, a VAV, HVAC system, etc. Where this becomes an important distinction is when evaluating technical proposals. If 5 proposals all satisfy the agency's need, there is a temptation on the part of the awarding body to want to select one over the others because there is a subjective judgment that it offers features it would be nice to have. Opening the door to subjective judgments opens the door for inappropriate influence in the procurement process. The way to avoid this temptation is to prepare a fully definitive job of preparing your statement of needs. If you want a brick facade or a VAV system, say so in your statement of needs. After preparation of the statement of needs, this is not always done, but frequently is completely appropriate, and that is a request for qualifications is issued. Some points to keep in mind: an RFQ limits competition and provides an opportunity for subjectivity to enter the procurement process. That this is not totally bad. If used, the best RFQ is the one that is the least restrictive. One of the best RFQ criterion from the standpoint of objectivity and efficacy is bonding capacity. If a contractor has been troublesome in the past, he's not going to be able to get a performance bond, and therefore that's a significant tip-off to an owner that that contractor may not be someone you want to do business with. To minimize the risk of subjectivity and foster competition, the statement of qualifications evaluation is better if it is a pass-fail rather than a short list or ranking system, because of the opportunity for subjectivity to creep in when using a short list or ranking system. The statement of qualifications should be, quote, in writing. In person, what is sometimes referred to as dog and pony shows, presentations by competitors can and often are highly deceptive. Criteria should be objectively evaluable. Items I would suggest to include in an RFQ: commitment of a bonding company to provide required performance payment and bid bonds, verifiable history of successful completion of recent, say the last 10 years, projects of similar size and scope, verifiable history of contested claims and litigation in, say, the last 10 years, experience and qualifications of key personnel and subcontractors, including the same project and legal history as required of the prime, and their commitments to their roles in the project. Something, of course, to be careful about is that one subcontractor will be proposed at the RFQ stage to do the plumbing work, and he has a wonderful reputation. But then when the work is undertaken, another lower cost plumbing subcontractor is used. So the owner needs to be alert to that sort of thing going on. Also, if there are any statutory and public policy commitments about small business and minority involvement, etc., that should be included in the RFQ. The statement of qualifications prepared by the competitors, the SOQ, should provide contractually enforceable commitments and verifiable information, not plans, because a plan is just that. It is a plan, but it is not a commitment to do anything or achieve an objective. The evaluation of statements of qualification should be by a panel of technically qualified professionals. Participation of political appointees or managers who are not technically qualified is not helpful. The history of successful completion of projects of similar size and scope by the prime as well as subcontractors should be verified. Projects should have fixed parameters, such as 10 similar projects in the last 5 years. It is best if the evaluation is pass-fail without ranking or a short list, in order to prevent the subjective criteria from creeping into the process. The primary reasons for a competitor to fail should be because information provided cannot be verified or failure to make contractually enforceable commitments. Now, the third step is the request for proposals is issued. The group of competitors that are deemed by the owner to be qualified advance to the proposal stage, and the request for proposal requests the technical proposals and the cost proposals, and that they be submitted separately, sealed. Some items to consider: in drafting the RFP on anything other than small projects, say less than 5 million. It's a good idea to pay competitors an honorarium for the intellectual property rights in their proposals. This is a good idea because A, it is a lot of work to put together a good proposal, and B, it avoids lawsuits by losing competitors. How much? A starting point for this discussion, it might be about 0.5% of the construction cost as an honorarium. In order to contain the budget for honoraria, it may be necessary to compromise a bit on my skepticism about the use of SOQs and my no ranking recommendation in evaluating SOQs. If honoraria are to be paid, an SOQ should be used and a short list of, say, top 5 developed. This puts a limit on the amount your agency or company has to pay out for honoraria. If honoraria are paid, a variation is to pay the honoraria to those competitors who make the short list, while permitting all others who make the pass-fail grade are permitted to submit proposals contingent on their waiving all intellectual property rights in their proposals. The most important item in an RFQ is the statement of needs, i.e. the conceptual plans and specifications. The more definitive they are, the better the chances your agency or company will get what it needs. How detailed do they need to be? A ballpark figure is somewhere between, say, 5 and 30% of working drawing. Incorporate by reference mandatory design and construction standards, and this is a separate discussion that we don't have time for in this chat today. Specify the agency's expectations for the technical proposals, i.e. I want to see floor plans, elevations, concept drawings for the structural system, HVAC, plumbing and electrical, etc. Outline specifications for materials and equipment. And this is important because this information becomes part of your contract, the contract between the owner and the designer. The most important consideration in evaluating the technical proposal is whether or not it satisfies the agency's statement of needs. There may be a temptation to want to make subjective judgments that one technical proposal is better than another. For example, this building is more attractive than that one, brick's better than stucco, VAV is better than terminal reheat, etc. This must be avoided if subjectivity is to be kept out of the procurement process. If you want these features in your building, state them in your statement of needs. The way to avoid this temptation is to make subjective judgments, is to do a thorough job of preparing your agency or company's statement of needs, the conceptual plans and specification. If your agency needs certain architectural attributes, it should define them in the conceptual plans and specification. If it needs a brick building, it should define it in the conceptual plans and specification. The same with a VAV, HVAC system, etc., etc. All technical proposals that satisfy the agency's statement of needs and other proposal requirements advance to the cost proposal stage. If only the best 3 are allowed to advance, subjective judgment is creeping into the procurement process. So there should be no ranking of technical proposals. Again, to do so allows subjective judgment into the procurement process. Moving on to the 4th step. The cost proposals are opened and the project is awarded to the lowest bidder. Although there is subjectivity in the evaluation of statements of qualifications and technical proposals, awarding the contract on the basis of the objective criterion of cost maintains the integrity of the procurement process. Now let's look at the second of these 2 processes that I believe can allow the implementation of design build in an ethical manner. This is construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts. The request for proposals for construction management services is issued. Included in construction management is the architect engineer services as well as the construction manager services. And the proposal includes a requirement that subcontracts be competitively bid. The construction manager is selected based on subjective criteria, such as experience and qualifications and other virtues. The agency and the selected competitor negotiate a fee for construction management services. This includes the architect engineer services. The cost to the agency for the project then is the sum of the construction management fee plus the cost of all competitively bid trade subcontracts. So the steps: number one, request for proposals for construction management services is issued, including the architect engineer services and requiring competitive bidding of trade subcontracts. Second, the construction manager is selected based on subjective criteria such as experience, qualifications, and other virtues. The agency or company and the selected competitor negotiate a fee for construction management services, which includes the architect engineer services. And the cost of the agency is the sum of the construction management fee plus all of the costs of the competitively bid trade or subcontracts. Now this means that in order to obtain the benefits of design build, around 25% of the project cost ends up awarded based on subjective criteria, compared to around 10% with the traditional design bid build, and 75% on the objective criterion of cost, competitive bidding. This, I believe, is a reasonable trade-off or compromise that will permit owners to benefits of design build in an ethical manner. Those who believe the design build construction delivery process has merit would be wise to move for laws, regulations, policies, and practices that institutionalize design build construction procurement processes that are based on the objective criterion of lowest cost based on competitive bidding, such as the two processes that I have suggested here. Otherwise, the public is going to ultimately throw out the design build construction delivery process baby along with the current design build construction procurement bathwater of awarding contracts based on subjective criteria. And this would not be desirable. Addressing these issues will not be easy because it requires adjustments in laws, regulations, policies, and practices in the public and, to a lesser extent, private sector. The forces that will expose changes have proven to be very effective in the public policy arena, have very significant vested interests in maintaining the design-build status quo, and engineers have a long history of non-existent or at best ineffectual involvement in shaping public policy. Left unchanged, the probable course of events will be the same as that which led to the adoption of competitive bidding as the law of the land over a century ago. Corruption in award of public and private contracts can be concealed from the public for only so long. Sooner or later it comes to light, and when it does, the public will demand reinstitution of competitive bidding in public agency and, to a lesser extent, private company procurements, and design bid build will again be the law. And that brings us to the conclusion of this little chat about ethical issues in implementing design build. I hope it's about what you were looking for, and that it has given you some things to think about, and that will be of a little bit of assistance to you moving forward. And so with that, let me just again thank you, wish you a very nice rest of the day, and that's it for me for now. Thanks a lot. Bye.